So today it's the second day in autumn, so it's time for another holiday to an adventurous and exciting place. Let's get in the car and let's go for a drive. So today we're heading to South Uist in the Outer Hebrides. Viewers of my previous videos will know that I went to the Isles of Harris and Lewis in March, and I also did a day trip to the Isle of Eigg in May. Our route takes us to Mallaig, where we catch a Calmac ferry. So the route to Mallaig takes us via Huntly, Beinn Mhor and Fort William. It is a journey which is about 3 hours and 45 minutes from my house. We started off with a battery charge of 92% and we arrived in Mallaig with about 37% charge remaining. So that's 55% battery charge used up for a journey which is about 168 miles. This is fairly typical for my Tesla Model 3 performance during the warmer months of the year. Well, here we are at Mallaig. So we'll head to the ferry terminal and then I think we will just get some shops, get a bit of lunch on the go. The ferry journey that we will be taking today would be taking us from Mallaig to Lochboisdale. This is a 3.5 hour ferry journey. However, you can see that the car navigation thinks that we're going to be running out of charge by the time we get to Lochboisdale. The car navigation was thinking we'll be taking the ferry across to Armadale on the Isle of Skye and then another ferry from Uig to Lochmaddy. So it's not a perfect navigation system. Mallaig is a very compact, bustling village, but a large stream of people coming out of the train station warranted an extra look. So this arrived not long after we arrived. This is the Jacobite Express. So this is the ferry which sails across to the Isle of Skye. It's quite a busy little ferry port here. I can see my ferry, the Lord of the Isles, coming in to dock, and it's going to be docking right there in about 5 minutes. So this one will be taking off very, very soon indeed. Ever since I was a child, I've always loved ferry journeys, and watching a ferry come into port, seeing all the activity around the ferry, watching the bow open up and then watching the ramp for the car deck be lowered down, that clunk of steel on steel when it hits the link span, that to me is the ferry telling everybody that it's arrived. And onto the ferry we drive. And there we go. So because we are on a ferry, I'm going to put the emergency brake on. So you push and hold the stalk here, and it goes to park with double click. We'll do one other thing. We'll go to safety. Scroll up. Tilt and intrusion detection, we'll turn that off. Hopefully it will work this time. The sailing from Mallaig to Lochboisdale is one of the longer domestic car ferry journeys that you can take in the United Kingdom. At 3.5 hours in length, it's surpassed only by the Oban to Barra and the Northlink ferries going from Aberdeen to Orkney in Shetland. But in spite of its length, it's also one of the most scenic, and it passes the Isle of Egg, the Isle of Rum and the Black Cullen of Skye before arriving at Lochboisdale in South Uist. On this journey we embarked with calm waters around the Inner Hebrides, and it was only once we got into the open Minch that the waters became moderate with a strengthening wind. The Lord of the Isles is quite an old ferry now, nearly 40 years old, and it has hit the news headlines when it broke down, suffering a fault with its firefighting system back in May. That has been fixed and it's in regular operation, but in spite of its age, it's got all the facilities that you could want for this particular journey. It's got a cafeteria, it's got a shop, it's got a bar, it's got seating areas for relaxation, and it's got seating areas for your dogs. In addition, it's got 3 open decks in the aft section of the ship from which you can watch wildlife and the scenery pass by. It's highly recommended that you spend a lot of time outside on deck for this journey during the summertime. So here we are on our way off the ferry. So bit of outcome, we did not have any car alarm activations whatsoever. So the trick is to turn off the tilt and intrusion detection when you are actually finally parked for the last time. When you start driving again, I think tilt and intrusion detection is reactivated. So here we are, South Uist. Once we arrived at South Uist, it wasn't far to get to our holiday cottage. It was literally just a hop, skip and a jump from the ferry terminal, and we arrived at our final destination, which is Beinn Mhor View. You can find this cottage on a website called Sykes Cottages, and we rented it for a week. This building used to be an NHS dentist, but it's been converted into a holiday cottage very recently. It's thoroughly modern inside and out. Well, it's a new day and we've got parked up. It was terrible weather last night. It was lots of heavy rain on a gale force wind. So a couple of things. Yes, I am plugged in. Let's have a look at something else. We have down there a car charger, but I'm not using it. Let's see what's going on. So here we've got the Rolex car charger, and what we have here is an RCD, and if we flip it up, it doesn't latch. And that tells me there's an earth fault. If there's no power, it should latch up anyway, but it should only unlatch when there's an earth fault. So this is something which an electrician is going to be called out to address. But as usual, the best advice I have is always be prepared. I have got a granny charger going to my extension cable. That's been charging up overnight, so we are about 75% charged for our adventures in South Uist. Okay, so we are now on our first drive. So the electrician had just come along and he's basically diagnosed that the breaker on the charger was actually broken. It wasn't full of water, it wasn't water damage at all. He was saying that Rolex chargers do have a reputation for breakers actually failing, and I'm gonna have to say I've never seen a failed RCBO or RCD ever. That my breakers at home have been completely reliable, so that was quite an interesting thing. Unfortunately, I don't have a spare part, so there you go. Right, so North Uist today, and I will interject at various points along this road. Ugh. Horrible bit of road. The weather in North Uist, by comparison to South Uist, was much nicer. It was actually quite bright, and whilst we did have near gale force winds, we found a walk on the northern extremity of North Uist, which was worth exploring. This is a peninsula which is called Outer Mhorain in Grenitote, and it goes out on a peninsula around lots of sand flats before heading out to a grassy headland right at the north of the island. We then return on the west side of the peninsula with a small diversion to a tidally linked island. Well, here we are at the northern end of North Uist. So over here we've got the Isle of Harris, where I was back in March. Small island in the middle, not too sure if it's inhabited or not. And the weather it's certainly a lot brighter here. There's patches of blue sky, which is a lot better than at the southern tip of the Outer Hebrides around Lochboisdale and Barra. So I think we've definitely scored the best hit for today. Right. Very good.
Look at this.
So this is where we come. We've been tracking along the east side of this peninsula. Now we've got the west side to go down. Okay, so we are now nearly on our way back to the car. Just a few hundred meters to go. Tide's gone out quite a bit, as you can see. North Uist, Benbecula, South Uist, as well as the smaller islands of Mhorain and Eriskay are all linked together with causeways. This allows continuous car driving all along the southern chain of the Outer Hebrides, with the exception of Barra. We've got a mix of dual track road, and we also have single track road as well. My experience is that the roads are fairly busy, so you will be expected to pull over and allow traffic to pass quite frequently on the single track sections. I do have to say, it's quite exciting to actually drive on the causeways. It's a unique feature of Hebridean driving. We don't have too many examples of that on the mainland of Scotland, or indeed anywhere else in the United Kingdom. Now, on our way back to the cottage, we found ourselves being plunged right back into the rain. It did seem as though the rain never ever stopped once in this southern portion of the Outer Hebrides, so we were very lucky with the weather. Next day though, we had another weather front first thing in the morning, so we delayed our start. However, we knew that the weather would be brightening up from the south, so we chose to go the other way and headed out to Eriskay on what was probably the longest and most spectacular section of the causeway that I've ever seen. So at Eriskay port we have a car charger. This is a 7 kilowatt, I'm sure. As you can see, it's rather maritime in terms of corrosion. So we've got type 2 ports in here. Looks like it's available. You might not be able to see it, but these are definitely glowing green. So the ferry port is the place to park your car if you want to go for a walk on Eriskay, but as it happened, there was a ferry coming in. We're not taking the ferry today to Barra, but we will be later on in the holiday. So after watching the ferry dock at Eriskay port, we walked along a sandy white beach north from the ferry port back towards the main village on the island of Eriskay. This is a very scenic section, and the weather progressively improved to bright blue skies in all directions. On the way back to the ferry port, we took a diversion up to the highest hill point on the island of Eriskay. So in the distance over here, we've got the Isle of Skye. That's the Isle of Rum. Over here we've got the Black Cuillins on Skye. Then we've got South Uist, Beinn Mhor in the distance, highest top on South Uist. And we've got the causeway linking South Uist with Eriskay. We've got the Isle of Barra. Behind this bit of hill here, we've got the airport of Barra. Then we've got the high top of Barra. Castle Bay is round the corner.
This is called Beinn Mhor.
Beinn Mhor.
Yes.
Very good. We also found some ponies. Hello. These are very famous ponies known as the Eriskay ponies, and we found them to be quite friendly. After the hill walk, we descended south to a bay which is called Vatersay. This is a place where we observed a couple of seals which were basking on the shores. It is also a place where you can sometimes find otters, although we didn't find any today. It was, of course, remarkably nice weather by this stage, but we returned back to the car and then we had a very scenic drive back north to South Uist and our base ready for our adventures the next day.
They're wearing masks in their cars.
So we are now parked up for our trip up to Beinn Mhor. Gonna have to say, this is what I've got to park in. There isn't much options in terms of parking, and this is the best. So Beinn Mhor is the highest mountain in South Uist. That's our target. The described start for the walk is along this road for about 500 meters. So we turn off to the right, just where this passing place sign is. Now the guidebook was suggesting leaving the car right here. They said there's a space for one person, one vehicle. Yeah, I looked at it and I just thought to myself, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, it feels firm underfoot, but yeah, I like to leave my cars where there's a bit of gravel. It just makes me feel a bit more reassured. So this is where we end up. We end up on this track. So we have gravel track, and now here we have got PT walking. Now I'm going to have to say the guidebook says that the track suddenly ends and drops us into the bog, quite literally. What it looks like we've got here is just two grooves for all-terrain vehicle types. So far, so good. So here we have an example of peat cuttings. So burning peat is still very much a activity which is done in the Outer Hebrides. I believe most of it is probably subsistence rather than commercial export, and I'm not too sure how long that activity will continue on for, given the CO2 impact that this kind of thing has. But certainly for commercial use, this is going to be outlawed before too long. But for subsistence use, I think it's still going to continue, especially with the cost of living crisis. But we've now got the bog proper to walk across. Apparently there's 20 minutes worth of drama. On the way up Beinn Mhor, crossing the bogs was fairly straightforward. If you stick to the watershed line, then you will have minimal drama. You can just hop from one tussock to the next, and you don't have to do too much diversion. We made the mistake on the way down, however, of following the footpath down the ridge, and that takes a route which is lower down, and you end up crossing a stream which is completely waterlogged on the peat banks either side, and we did have a bit of drama in that situation. But once beyond the bog, going up the hills is fairly straightforward, a bit wet underfoot, but nothing particularly dramatic. Once you get above the bog, then ascent is fairly swift to the first summit before the summit ridge. So here we are, here's the summit out in the distance. So we've got this ridge walk to do, but most of the ridge, we either, on the difficult bits, we either pass on the left or we pass on the right. So here we are, this is the last stretch of the summit ridge. We are bypassing the summit ridge to the right. There is a footpath which I can see. It doesn't look too difficult, and then we go beneath the summit and then end up on the other side of the ridge, and then we backtrack back onto the ridge. Okay, so what we are looking at here is the Isle of Barra to the south, and then you've got the rest of South Uist to the east. We've got a rain shower, but beyond that you can see the Isle of Rum. Then we've got the Black Cuillins of Skye over here. Then we've got the Dunvegan Hills. I can't remember what they're called now. MacLeod's Tables, that's the one, yes. Then further north on Uist we have got the mountain of Hecla, which is about 600, just over 600 meters tall. It's not much lower than Beinn Mhor. Beyond we have got the Harris Hills in the distance, and slightly further forwards, but behind Hecla, you can see the highest hill on South Uist. Now, it was something we discussed doing. I'm not too sure if we're going to do it. It does involve a tidal walk. Then we've got the main population centre on Benbecula, which is a village called Ballyvannick. That's a village called Ballyvannick. And then we have got the ridge that we've just come across. So, very nice. Now it's time to head back over the ridge. Well, it's been a bit of a boggy descent, again with a little bit of drama involving some wet feet, but finally we're back to the car. Next day we took a boat trip on the island of Grenitote. This is a company called Lady Anne Boat Tours. They do a series of boat tours which centre on the island of Mhorain. This is an uninhabited island with only one holiday cottage on it, which is owned by a Spanish family. On this boat trip we saw about 12 sea eagles. We also saw plenty of seals, other bird life, and we saw a pod of porpoises as well. So it was overall it took about 2 hours to do this boat trip, and we certainly enjoyed this trip. The waters were very calm, and that made spotting some of these animals a lot easier. Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming aboard with
Bye
us.
bye.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was brilliant.
So on our final full day on the Outer Hebrides, we decided we wanted to go and make a day trip to the island of Barra. So we were back over the Eriskay causeway to the Eriskay port. The question is there sufficient ground clearance to load a Tesla Model 3 onto these inter-island ferries? Now, if you look at a diagram of ground clearances for the Tesla Model 3, you'll come to realize that the maximum sharp incline that you can approach is about 9 degrees, and the maximum sharp hump that you can drive over is about 11.5 degrees. And that raises the question, can you actually drive a Tesla Model 3 onto these ferries? Okay, so here we go, onto the ferry we go. Just take it easy. Okay, no scraping whatsoever. That's all I want to see. Right, there we go. The sailing from Eriskay to Barra lasts about 40 minutes, and it's definitely another journey that's worth spending all your time out on deck. There is a lot of scenery to have a look at. We sailed past a number of rocky outcrops, and we saw quite a number of seals, for example. No problem at all with driving off the ramp. So there you go. Tesla Model 3 can drive on a Calmac inter-island ferry. No problems whatsoever. So with just 6 hours on this island, we wanted to make the most of our visit, and we wanted to do as many different things as possible. First on our list was a short walk on a bit of coastline near Tangersdale. This is on the western side of the Isle of Barra, and you can see here we've got a bit of rocky coastline, and we also have a beach to walk on. So this is the start of our walk. Here we are, 2 cows along the way. Hello. Nice to see you. So that's what we've got to look forward to on the return. So next up on our list was the island of Vatersay. Now, one of my favourite YouTube channels is Jeff Marshall, and he recently visited the most westerly bus stop on the island of Vatersay. I wanted to go just a little bit further and visit the most westerly point on the public road network in Scotland. Okay, so this is the westernmost extent of the public road network. I have to say that road was pretty rough. Okay, so this is the westernmost extent in Scotland that I can take my car. Any further west and it's all private track. And over in this direction you've got the actual road that heads here. This is on the island of Vatersay. It's not a very good road, but it's quite short. Yeah, model free, coped perfectly well with this one. Suffice to say, I will never drive on the most westerly public road ever again in Scotland. Whilst it was also the most westerly point, it was also so bad that it could have been maintained by Aberdeen City Council. So we continued further south on much better public roads. Here we found a really absolutely drop-dead gorgeous beach to stop and visit. Well, the westernmost road in Scotland isn't much to talk about. In fact, it's probably the worst road I've ever seen on a public highway in this country. But turn left at the most westerly bus stop on Vatersay, and also the most westerly in Scotland, and you end up on this beach, and it's a wonderful beach, and you know, it's magnificent. Next up was Castle Bay, which is the main village on the island of Barra, and I have to say, in the Outer Hebrides, this is probably one of the bonniest villages I've ever seen. So, here is the rapid charger at the ferry terminal. As you can see, it is a charger error CCS server, so you can't rely on this one. However, if you go up to the council offices on the main road, there is a 7 kilowatt charger up there, might be 22 kilowatts. It says status unknown on the app. It looks in perfectly good working order on the actual charger post itself. Now, otters are very common in the Outer Hebrides on the shoreline. However, we never saw any on our holiday. The last time I saw one was the beginning of August when I was on a long weekend out in Shetland. However, we do have another type of otter that we're about to see, a twin otter. Take off run now. No! It's just... I started the day with a fairly full camera battery, and as I was filming the startup, taxi and takeoff, I watched my camera battery light flashing in the top right corner of my viewfinder, and it was such a moment of really poor timing that the battery would fail just as the wheels were leaving the ground for the twin otter. So Barra Airport and the famous beach over to the east, and over to the west, sand dunes, And then we have a beach open to the public. And a very nice beach it is too. Back at the Ardmore ferry terminal for the ferry back to Eriskay. The thing is that we arrived on Barra with 75% charge. We're now at around about 64% charge. So you don't really use all that much batteries when you're on the island itself. My granny charger is back on South Uist. So I've still got my Type 2 charger. I wouldn't take any chances with not bringing your cables. It's always good to have your cables with you. So yeah, this is the last full day and it's been a fantastic holiday. In terms of electric charging facilities in the Outer Hebrides as a whole, nothing much has changed since March when I did my Harris and Lewis trip. There haven't been any new chargers out here. In terms of facilities in hotels and bed and breakfasts, I haven't really looked. The last time I looked was in Ullapool and there was very, very few facilities available dedicated to electric vehicles. My advice at the moment is still the same now as it was back in November. Go to a holiday cottage where you've got access to a 3-pin charger close to where you park your car. You're not going to get that at a hotel right now, and it's a shame. There's an awful lot more electric vehicles. I've seen quite a few Teslas. I've seen Kia Niro EVs out here. I've seen the Kia EV6. I've seen a Hyundai Ioniq 5 out here. I've seen Nissan Leafs. So there are electric cars out here. Holidaying out in the Outer Hebrides with an electric car definitely works, but it depends how you do it.
Take it slowly.
There we go. Safe and sound back in South Uist, we returned to our holiday cottage for one more evening. The following morning, we then embarked on the bigger Lord of the Isles ferry back to the mainland. Well, here we are on the last day in Lochboisdale. Final cars being loaded onto the ferry. So we left Lochboisdale in fine weather and calm seas. It was a spectacular crossing. Scenery was absolutely magnificent with a pin-sharp horizon. And later on in the voyage, we were accompanied for a brief time by bottlenose dolphins. They had a tendency to leap out of the water, and I counted about 5 or 6 bottlenose dolphins. Some of them were quite capable of swimming underneath the boat and then re-emerging on the other side. In spite of ourselves being back on the mainland, our holiday had not yet finished. The night before, we found that the weather forecast for Fort William was going to be bright blue skies on Saturday. So we decided to book an extra night's accommodation in the vicinity of Fort William. So the next day we climbed Beinn Nevis. For me, it was my 4th time on this mountain, and for Rachel, it was her 1st time. Sadly though, in spite of the fine weather, there isn't much to recommend for Beinn Nevis. It is chronically overcrowded. In fact, you'll find more personal space in Heathrow Airport Terminal 5. As a result, we simply cannot recommend climbing this mountain at all unless you find a really quiet way up. And yes, I do know a nice quiet way up, but it's not suitable for beginners. We finally headed back home in glorious evening sunshine weather. The roads were lovely and quiet, so overall we spent no money whatsoever on electricity. On the way out, we used solar power for charging up my car, and on the way back and within the Outer Hebrides, the electricity was included in the rent for the cottage. We had no charging facilities available in our Fort William overnight accommodation, so we charged up to 93% in Lochboisdale the day before, and we ended up the journey at 26% charge once we returned home. So this accommodation represented the first time that I used accommodation where charging was not available. That said, within Fort William there are superchargers and there are other rapid chargers available for non-Tesla vehicles. Well, that's it for this video. Hopefully my next video will be sooner rather than later. I'm hoping that's going to be part 2 of my energy bank commissioning project. So far, the word from Solar Edge is that I need a new part, and that new part is delayed in terms of shipment. I haven't got any more information than that. But hopefully it will be days rather than weeks or months before I can get something. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you again very soon.